Okay, as far as the interview assignment, I thought it was really helpful because I haven't really been in a total official interview, even in person. All of my interviews have been via the phone. So it was just interesting to see the different types of interviews that people actually do interview online. I know this is kind of totally off topic, but in the Green Hornet, I know that J.Joe auditioned via Skype, I think it was. So, I guess they actually do use these techniques out in the real world to interview online. And so I thought it was really helpful just to be open to the different technology that we have to use for these sort of projects.
Yeah, and I thought that, I've only had one kind of formal interview type situation, and walking out, I realized I bombed it because, even on the webcam in person, you don't realize how hard it is to kind of talk about those things. And even though we're not doing real interviews or anything like that, just this little bit of experience has helped us. And that little activity we did for the interview unit where you had to sit there and I think it was 10 questions or something. And, and you had a timer and you had to talk for 2 minutes. And I think, it's hard to talk for that long. And when you're forced to do it, it makes you realize that it probably is important to talk for a while, even if you are kind of blabbing on a little bit, getting some material out and explaining yourself is important. And it's not a natural thing to do. So I learned a lot from that assignment and the whole unit as a whole, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I've only had really one, I guess it's like a pseudo interview. It wasn't exactly like an interview. It was kind of going into meet with the doctor that I'm working for now. And it was kind of more of a conversational interview, more, not so much, all right, what have you done? What can you do? Type of thing. So, writing the personal statement beforehand and then filming, trying to not sound like full of yourself is probably the most weird thing, just because I didn't have that interview. I didn't know that I should be saying all my experiences and how it's led me to who I am today. Whereas in the interview I was in before, it was kind of just what are you interested in, and how can I help you get experience in that? So, doing the 2-minute personal statement, 2-minute interview was kind of just a whole new experience for me, because I had never really experienced that type of interview before. So add the computer and technology on top of it. It was definitely out of my comfort zone to film an interview for me. But now I think I'd be able to and be okay with it. But it was definitely hard for me. It was nerve-wracking for me.
Yeah, I think the personal statement was really helpful because I've never had to write any of those. So I just focused on highlighting my experiences. So that's how I took the personal statement.
Yeah, and I thought the personal statement was kind of interesting because you don't really think you're going to go walk into an interview and give your own kind of personal statement. Definitely not as formal as we did it, but that's probably a good tool to have. To think that you do walk in and you kind of open up with your own type of resume. You speak your resume and stuff, have them look it over and stuff, and to have that personal statement, and then the Q&A that we did with each other. And even the closing statement, to think that it's pretty important to come up with a memorable closing statement. And just getting that little bit of practice, I think, helped all of us. And definitely interviewing each other, us being the same age, and I think that was helpful. And because obviously when you go interview, it's a lot more intimidating, but we didn't have to worry about the whole intimidation stuff when it's just us. So that was good. I'm not saying you guys aren't intimidated, but
yeah. The Q&As probably was definitely a good practice run too, just because I was definitely caught off guard, that's for sure. So, if I can get caught off guard with people my age, I'd be scared to find out what people in the real world could come up with to ask. And how you gotta think on your feet, it's pretty hard. At least for me.
Yeah. So, do we want to move on to, our expectations for the progress report then, or?
Yeah, we can move on expectation. I think another thing that's important for us to talk about is the critiques that we've been doing for other groups of the podcast and for ourselves, and just kind of, I think, our experiences with that and how listening to other people makes you realize that everyone's kind of, even though it seemed, especially the podcast, because you're just talking into the computer and you were kind of, like we were just talking about how we were kind of put off by the sound of our own voice, which is funny to say, but and then you talk and you hear everyone else's and you sit there with a critique sheet and you're, good, bad, and excellent. And I mean, for the most part, I found that most people's critiques are not critiques, but the actual assignments are pretty good. And, I was pretty surprised at how well spoken most of the people, even on the interview and everything, people are pretty well spoken and did well, and makes you feel better about the assignments that you do from here on out, that everyone's kind of on the same page and doing the same work that you're doing. So I thought that was interesting to do those critiques.
I think the critiques have been helpful in knowing what to look for, how to analyze another speaker, and just knowing how to apply both their good things to our own speaking abilities, and also knowing what they do and knowing to make sure that we don't do it ourselves in the future. So.
Yeah, I think even just like an interview like we had like with both of you, like I feel like I learned like how I should be when I do my own interview. And the same thing like with hearing other people's interview, or hearing other people's podcasts too, you hear like, oh, that was like a really good thing, and you try to work that into your speech. Or, you catch something that was like, uh-oh, like that's not so good, try to avoid that. And like for like the interview, like Mike, you said you were so genuine in yours, like you could definitely tell just by your tone of voice, like you knew what you were saying and like you were confident. And then Carissa, how you like worked in your experience and you explained it like so well, you could make like the listener feel like they understand like what China is not exactly a conversation that like I could relate to, but the way you spoke, like it sounded like I could actually understand and relate. So like learning both of those things, like I try to work that into my interview as well. So that's why I feel like the critiques are definitely like very, very helpful in when even creating your own. So,
yeah.
I definitely agree, Mike. Like a lot of people did really good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting you bring up the fact that, how helpful it is to listen to other people, because you learn a lot more from listening to other people than you think. And even if it's subconsciously and, consciously a lot of the time, you do think about things that you hear other people do, and makes you want to do something or not do something. Either way, you can't help but learn a good amount from listening to other people. And, like you guys said, you take a little bit from each person, and, in the end, you make yourself a lot better, which is the ultimate goal. But we can move on to the expectations that we have for ourselves after what we've learned, what we've talked about, and we can talk about what we plan to do in the future and how this class is going to help us do that, and the goals and the techniques we've learned through our readings, through the critiques and everything like that, what we've learned and how we plan to apply that in the future. So Allie, if you want to, doesn't have to be a long anything, but just kind of kick off the conversation about how we're going to apply this.
Well, for the progress report, I would say that I think just the experience of giving like a presentation to other people on the computer is I'm definitely going to apply like what I've learned and what we did in the interview, and then just the Skype progress report right now that we're doing. I've never really done this before, so I feel like I'll be more comfortable when I'm presenting on my organization. I've never done an online PowerPoint, so that's something I'm a little concerned about, a little worried about. But I feel that even if with this experience, I'll be able to apply what I've learned, like just by giving like an online interview to giving an online presentation. I think the best technique I've learned so far is probably the simple things, like you don't want to, what's your background, what's your lighting, what's your body positioning, because I've noticed in some of the groups that I think I gave mine like a pretty weird angle because I was sitting on the floor with my computer my computer on a chair just so it'd be like eye level because I didn't want it to be so awkward. So, I think I'll definitely go into the progress report feeling a little more confident because we've had this and the interview.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, I think our next one's a much more formal type thing. And, the whole PowerPoint is going to make things a lot more complicated. But that the technology book that we have, I mean, most of it is dedicated to how to give a PowerPoint presentation. And I think that's going to be helpful. Just little things of when you're doing a PowerPoint of a computer, there's a lot more techniques that you have to use, especially in the tone and the rate of your voice. You have to know when the slides are going to change and what the audience is seeing, which is not always what you're seeing, which of course complicates things. But I'm looking forward to it. And I think that because in the future, no matter what we do, somehow that's going to come up. I mean, we're bound to come up with something where we have to completely give a presentation over the internet, which is not the best, but we might be forced to do it. And I think this in a classroom is much easier to do that than and to help us for the future.
Yeah, I think both of you have been talking about like the online side of it, but I think the general just group progress, a progress report is just important for almost in any occupation. I would think is you want to present where you're going with the project, what you've done so far, where you are at now, and what you're planning on finishing in the future. I think that's just important, not just in occupational, but also graduate schools and that sort of thing with your research and everything. So I think, that's been very important. Of course, doing it, so knowing how to organize the speech, is very helpful. And also, just knowing that even if we do have to give it online or in person, we're learning both techniques to do both of those. So I think just all of the presentations we've had to give have been very useful and, in our future lives that we are most likely going to be using these techniques that we're learning in this class.